The square seemed larger at dawn. The old trees made a low sound, a scratching of leaves that felt like someone thinking. The shop windows were misted with dew, and the church bell 2 streets away missed its first strike before finding the right tone. There was a newspaper stand that never sold enough papers, a clock stuck above the barber shop, and in the distance, a road unfolding toward an open yellow field where the wind moved like water running quietly. The town breathed carefully, as if afraid to wake someone. The clown was already there when the diner lights came on. They weren't the kind of lights that called out, just a timid glow, amber-colored, that made the counter's metal shimmer at the edges. He sat on a wooden bench that creaked, his hands resting on his lap, fingers bare, his makeup discreet, white like paper that had seen rain, and a mouth drawn in red that neither smiled nor frowned. His eyes did most of the work, slow, attentive, as if listening to a sound far away and trying to guess where it came from. A few minutes later, the boy crossed the square. He carried a backpack whose zipper wouldn't close properly, and his sneakers were beginning to split at the toes. He walked with careful steps, each one a quiet attempt not to be noticed. He stopped in front of the diner, looked at his reflection in the glass, brushed his hair the way boys do when they don't yet know who they want to be, and went inside. The smell of old coffee and pancakes opened up like a worn blanket. On the radio, a decades-old song begged for a simple love. The waitress knew the boy but only said, "Morning," without raising her voice. He sat in the last booth, near the back door, and asked for water. He noticed the clown on the other side, seated, motionless, and lowered his eyes. There was no fear there, only recognition, of something that didn't speak and, because of that, felt more real. They looked at each other for a second that lasted longer than it should, and in that second, the church bell tried again to find its tone. Outside, the street was almost empty. A truck rolled by slowly, as if obeying some unwritten rule. The breeze carried a candy wrapper to the curb. On the lamppost across the street, a faded poster announced a festival that had already passed, fireworks now reduced to white dots on an almost gray-blue background. The town kept such remnants with care, as if it still needed them. The boy lifted the glass halfway to his mouth and stopped. It wasn't a sound that made him stop, it was the opposite, silence, suddenly thicker. He turned his head slightly, the way animals do when they hear something people can't. The waitress, not knowing why, wiped the counter harder. The clown kept his eyes on the boy, and that was where his strength lived, a presence that didn't push, but didn't step back either. Across the street, under the shadow of an awning, someone stood still. You couldn't see the face, only the line of a shoulder, the still curve of a hand tucked into a coat pocket. The air inside the diner changed, like when a storm is still behind the hills and you feel the pressure in your chest. The boy placed his glass on the counter without a sound. His eyes found the clown's again, asking without asking. The clown rose slowly, every movement measured, crossing the space between tables as one might walk through a room where someone sleeps. The diner door opened, a rectangle of pale light, and the shoulder in the shadow moved half a step. No one spoke. The waitress froze with the cloth in her hand. The radio hissed for no reason. The clown stood between the boy and the door, not facing the shadow, but slightly turned, chin lowered, hands calm and steady, as if offering the world a pause. The boy took a deeper breath, and the fingers clutching the edge of the booth loosened just a millimeter. Sometimes, a millimeter is all that separates a scream from a sigh. The shadow outside pressed the door. It didn't close completely, just enough to stay, like a promise. The clown didn't move. Somewhere in the distance, a car started. A dog barked without conviction. The diner light seemed to warm by half a degree. The boy straightened his shoulders, still small, still quiet, and looked at the clown for the third time. It was a look that said, "I can't do this alone." The clown answered in his own slow way, "I'm here." In the open field behind the square, the November wind rolled through the dry grass, carrying the smell of earth, as if the ground itself was reminding people there's still a place to stand. The town, in that minute, seemed to listen. There was a new space between things, a nearly invisible adjustment. The barbershop clock stayed frozen. Silverware clinked faintly in the kitchen. The boy gripped his backpack strap, and the clown, without touching him, leaned just enough so that his shadow covered the boy's feet. It was enough. Something, still without a name, had begun to change. But no one in that town could imagine what would come next. The boy didn't go to school that day. He followed the clown instead. Not right away. There was hesitation, a pause that lasted through the sound of a bus passing, the faint clatter of dishes in the diner sink, the scent of coffee cooling. But when the clown stepped outside, the boy slid from the booth and moved after him, careful, almost weightless. The waitress watched through the window, her hand still on the coffee pot, unsure if she had just seen something ordinary or something that would one day matter. They walked across the square without speaking. The clown's shoes barely lifted dust. His coat, though worn, moved softly in the wind, carrying with it the faintest jingle of a bell hidden somewhere in the fabric. The boy walked 3 steps behind. When the wind grew stronger, he zipped his jacket up to his neck, though the zipper caught and stopped halfway. The clown turned slightly, noticed, and simply slowed down. The boy didn't thank him. He didn't have to. They crossed a bridge that ran over a narrow stream, the kind that only sounded alive after rain. Beneath it, glass bottles and leaves collected where the current was weakest. The boy looked down and saw his reflection blur beside the clown's. One face small and restless. The other steady, almost still. For a moment, he wondered if the clown had always lived there, like part of the town itself, like the statue in front of the library or the cracked bench near the old oak. By the time they reached the edge of town, the road widened into open fields. Tall grass brushed their knees. A farmhouse leaned at a distance, its windows sealed with wood and silence. Crows lifted lazily from the roof, circling above before settling again. The air had a smell of iron and cold rain coming. The clown stopped and looked toward the horizon. He wasn't waiting for anything in particular, only allowing the moment to be long enough for breathing. The boy sat on a fence post and let his legs dangle. He tried to speak once, but the words came out half-shaped, like stones too heavy for their size. The clown didn't turn his head. He only reached into the pocket of his coat and drew out a red balloon, deflated and soft, the rubber dulled by time. He stretched it once, twice, then handed it to the boy without expression. The boy stared at it, not understanding, until the wind caught the edge of the balloon and fluttered it like a small flag. The boy's shoulders loosened. He smiled, not the full kind, but the kind that hides behind the lips, waiting for permission. They stayed like that for a while. The town behind them shrank into outlines, the church steeple, the diner's roof, the single stoplight blinking yellow through the mist. The clown leaned on the fence post beside the boy. His face, beneath the white paint, looked tired but kind. You could tell, somehow, that he carried the quiet weight of people he had stood beside before. Then, from the direction of the town, came a sound. Not sharp, but distinct, the slam of a door. The boy's back straightened. The clown's head turned slightly, eyes narrowing just a fraction. The sound didn't repeat, but its echo carried across the field, folding into the grass. The boy gripped the balloon in his hand, pressing the soft rubber flat. His breath quickened, but he didn't run. The clown's gaze drifted toward him, not asking, not commanding, just present. The boy looked at the horizon again, and the thin line of his jaw trembled. "He'll come," he whispered. It wasn't a confession. It was a simple fact. The clown's eyes didn't change, but something about the air around him grew firmer, stiller. He knelt slowly, his shadow long in the pale light, and placed a hand, gloved, steady, on the wooden fence between them. The boy watched that hand for a long time, as though it carried an answer he couldn't yet read. The wind shifted. Somewhere behind the church, thunder muttered, the kind that never fully arrives. The boy stood, the balloon now tucked inside his jacket pocket, and looked back toward the town. For the first time, he didn't look afraid, only tired of waiting for what always came. The clown rose too, his eyes following the same invisible line through the mist. The crows on the farmhouse roof stirred again. When they began walking back, the road felt narrower, though it hadn't changed. The boy walked beside the clown now, their steps matching without intention. The light had softened into the color of pewter, and the sound of the stream under the bridge had grown louder, restless, as if it knew the day was not finished. By the time they reached the square again, the diner's lights were off. The windows reflected only the gray of the sky. The boy stopped near the bench where the clown had sat that morning. He placed his backpack down and touched the wood, tracing a line in the dust. The clown stood behind him, unmoving, his reflection faint in the glass. Somewhere, far down the road, an engine started, low, slow, deliberate. The boy didn't turn. The clown did. Neither spoke. Between them, the town seemed to hold its breath. And though no one saw it, the first drops of rain began to fall on the square, quiet as a secret being kept. And the town would remember that silence for a long time to come. Rain came slowly that evening, in long diagonal threads that blurred the shapes of things: the steeple, the diner sign, the rusting swings behind the school. It softened every sound until even footsteps became whispers against the pavement. The boy and the clown stood under the overhang of an abandoned bus stop at the edge of town. The rain made a soft drumming on the metal roof, a rhythm that could have been mistaken for a heartbeat. The boy had his knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them. The clown sat beside him, motionless, his coat darkened by the water that had found its way through the seams. Neither spoke. The boy's backpack leaned against the wall, one strap torn, and the deflated red balloon peeked from its pocket like a forgotten word. In the distance, headlights passed on the main road, two brief lines of light bending and vanishing into the rain. The boy lifted his head each time, as if checking for something he didn't want to see. When the sound faded, he rested his chin on his arms again. The clown watched the street too, not out of fear, but out of understanding, the kind of watching that comes from someone who knows what waits in the spaces between things. At some point, the boy spoke, his voice thin, like it wasn't sure it belonged in the air. "He used to wait outside," he said. "Didn't knock. Just waited." The clown didn't move. His head stayed tilted slightly, enough to show that he was listening. The rain filled the silence that followed, like someone quietly closing a door. "I tried not to look," the boy added. "But you can feel it, even when you don't look. You can feel when someone's thinking about hurting you." The clown's painted mouth didn't change, but his breathing grew slower, deeper, grounding the space around them. He reached into his coat pocket again, and for a moment the boy thought he might take out another balloon. Instead, the clown pulled out a small, folded piece of cloth, white, with a faint red thread at the edge, and handed it to him. The boy took it without question, holding it in both hands as though it were fragile. They stayed that way for a while. The rain thickened, then softened, then thickened again. When thunder rolled, it did so far away, only brushing the edges of the town. Through the curtain of water, the diner's neon flickered once and went out completely. Everything after that felt suspended, like the town was waiting to exhale. From down the hill came the sound of gravel shifting beneath tires. A truck. Slow, deliberate. The boy's shoulders tensed. The clown stood up, not quickly, but with the same patient gravity he carried in every motion. His shadow lengthened on the wet pavement, bending toward the road. The truck stopped near the square. Its headlights cut through the mist, flattening the shapes of the trees. The boy's breath came shorter now. He looked at the clown, not for answers but for presence. The clown looked back, steady and quiet. The rain fell between them like a curtain. When the truck door opened, the boy closed his eyes. He didn't cry. He didn't move. The sound of boots against puddles was heavy, certain. The clown stepped forward, one measured step at a time, his reflection following him in the thin layer of water covering the street. He stopped at the corner, where the light from the street lamp caught the red on his mouth and turned it dark. No words were spoken, only that stillness, thick as fog, stretching across the distance. The truck's engine idled. A figure stood by the open door, a shape more than a man, the kind of presence that bends the air around it. The clown didn't stare. He simply stood, every inch of him unmoving, every breath a quiet defiance. The boy opened his eyes and saw only the back of the clown's coat, the faint bell at its hem trembling with the rain. The truck's headlights flickered once, twice. Then the engine coughed, turned over, and the vehicle rolled backward, its taillights fading into the distance until there was only the soft hiss of the rain again. The clown didn't turn around right away. He stayed there until the road was empty, until even the echo of tires was gone. Then he faced the boy again. The boy's eyes were wide, not in fear but in something close to disbelief, the kind that comes when the world shifts without noise. They walked back toward the square without speaking. The rain had thinned to a mist. The streetlight above the diner flickered back to life, its glow pale and uncertain. The boy still held the folded cloth in his hands, now damp and wrinkled. The clown nodded toward it, just once, and the boy tucked it into his pocket. When they reached the bench, the clown sat down again, his hands folded neatly on his lap. The boy stood beside him, watching the steam rise from the wet pavement. Somewhere in the dark, a train horn sounded, low, steady, passing through. The boy looked up at the sky, gray layered over gray, and for the first time that day, he let his shoulders drop. The clown turned his head slightly, the gesture so small it might have gone unnoticed. But the boy saw it, and without meaning to, leaned closer, the way you do when warmth feels new. The rain stopped. A thin moon pressed through the clouds. And for that moment, the whole town seemed to listen, to the silence that comes after something has shifted forever. But there was still one more night the town would never forget. Morning arrived without sunlight. The sky was the color of ash, and the town seemed to move slower than usual, as if everything had stayed up too late. Water still clung to the grass and telephone wires, trembling with each faint breath of wind. The diner remained closed, its blinds drawn, a small hand-painted sign flipped to "See you tomorrow." No one had written the tomorrow's date. The boy woke on the bench by the square, wrapped in the clown's coat. It smelled faintly of soap and sawdust, a scent that didn't belong to this town. The clown was standing a few steps away, near the statue of a soldier that had lost its nameplate to rust. He was looking up, not at the sky, but at the space just beneath it, where clouds gather before rain decides whether to return. His white makeup had softened overnight, cracked slightly at the edges, showing skin underneath. When the boy stirred, the clown turned, only enough to acknowledge he was awake. The boy folded the coat carefully and stood. His backpack rested beside him, heavier somehow, though he hadn't added anything. He rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dried rain and sleep. "Where do you go?" he asked, "when people stop needing you?" The clown didn't answer. He only started walking. The boy followed. They passed the library with its locked doors, the drugstore with its single light flickering behind the shelves, and the barber's pole that still spun though no one had been inside for weeks. The air had a stillness that made even breathing sound loud. They reached the outskirts of town again, where the road split, one path toward the open fields, the other down toward the train tracks. The clown stopped at the crossroads. His shoes left shallow prints in the damp dirt. He turned to the boy and waited. The boy hesitated. He looked down both roads, as if trying to see a future in either direction. From the tracks came the low hum of an approaching train, steady, inevitable. From the fields came only silence and the far-off movement of wind. The boy clenched his fists in his pockets. "He'll look for me," he said quietly. "He always does." The clown tilted his head, eyes soft but unreadable. He reached into his pocket and took out something small, a button, pale blue, worn smooth on one side. He placed it in the boy's palm, closing the boy's fingers around it. The gesture said everything words would have ruined. They stood there for a long time, until the sound of the train drew closer, its rhythm pulsing through the ground. The boy looked down the track and then back toward the town. In the window of a distant house, a curtain moved. A shape, maybe someone, maybe just the wind, shifted behind it. The clown took one step toward the boy, then knelt so they were eye level. The red on his mouth was faded now, barely visible. "He won't find you here," the silence between them seemed to say. "Not anymore." The boy nodded, though he wasn't sure if he believed it or only wanted to. When the train finally appeared, it came slowly, its horn muted by the mist. The boy slung his backpack over one shoulder. The clown rose again, straightening his coat though it no longer kept its shape. The train stopped briefly, just long enough for the boy to step up. He turned once more toward the square, where the diner's sign hung crooked, and the statue watched over nothing in particular. The clown lifted his hand, not a wave, just a quiet acknowledgement that things change, and that's enough. The boy's hand twitched in reply before he disappeared into the car. As the train began to move, its wheels caught the light for a moment. The clown stood on the dirt road until the sound faded into nothing. His reflection lingered in the puddles, pale against the gray morning, before the wind broke it apart. When he finally walked back toward the square, no one saw him. The benches were empty, the streetlights still buzzing though the day had already begun. The rain smell had left the air, replaced by something dry, like the scent of dust rising after years of stillness. He reached the spot in front of the diner and sat down again. The bell above the door moved slightly in the breeze, though no one entered. The clown rested his hands on his knees and closed his eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply stayed, a quiet reminder of what had been carried through the night. And somewhere down the track, the boy looked out from the window of the moving train, his fingers still holding the blue button, his heart unsure but lighter than it had been. The town below him grew smaller until it was only color and shape, the kind that memory keeps even when details fade. And though the town would wake and go on, something of that morning would never leave it again. The days that followed folded softly into one another, like sheets being put away in a quiet house. The town moved as it always had, slow, deliberate, unsure if anything had really changed. Morning coffee still steamed behind diner windows, the church bell still missed its first note, and the same stray dog still slept beneath the bench by the barber shop. Yet something beneath all that rhythm had shifted. The air carried it, a gentleness that hadn't been there before, as if the town itself had taken a deeper breath and decided to hold it. The clown remained. He didn't travel, didn't perform, didn't ask for coin. Some said he rented the small shed behind the library. Others thought he slept on the benches near the square. No one ever saw him arrive anywhere, and no one saw him leave. He was simply part of the landscape now, as natural as the leaning lamppost or the crooked fence near the field. Children, the braver ones, sometimes approached him after school. They never got close enough to touch, but they'd hover nearby, waiting. The clown would tilt his head or point softly toward the clouds, small gestures that made the world feel slower, somehow safer. He never spoke. But once, when a little girl began to cry over a broken kite, he took the string from her hand, untangled the knot with patient fingers, and let the wind carry it again. The girl ran after it laughing. When she turned back, the clown had already gone. At dusk, he would walk the length of Main Street, his coat brushing against the shop doors. The shopkeepers grew used to seeing his reflection in the glass. They didn't ask questions anymore. A few even began leaving a cup of coffee or a folded sandwich napkin by the doorstep. Some mornings, the cup was still there, untouched. Other mornings, it was gone. One evening, after the rain had returned in a fine mist, the waitress from the diner found something under the window ledge. A small piece of white cloth with a red thread at its edge, folded carefully, as if it had been waiting to be noticed. She brought it inside, laid it on the counter, and stood there staring at it for a long time before putting it in her apron pocket. That night, she left the diner light burning until dawn. Far down the tracks, where the train slowed to change direction, a boy stepped off at a town whose name he didn't know how to pronounce. He carried a backpack that seemed lighter than before. In his palm, the blue button caught the first sunlight in weeks. He turned it over, feeling the worn smoothness, then tucked it into his pocket. He didn't look back. But every time the wind shifted, he thought he could hear a faint chime, the sound of a bell from a coat hem, far away. Back in the square, the clown sat beneath the same tree he had chosen that first morning. The leaves above him had begun to fall, some catching in his lap. He brushed them aside gently, one by one. Across the street, the church bell rang noon, missing its first note as always. A man passing by paused to listen. "Funny," he murmured. "It sounds softer than it used to." The clown lifted his head, eyes half closed, and watched the sky where clouds were pulling apart. There was color there now, faint blue behind the gray. A gust of wind swept through, carrying with it the smell of damp soil and coffee grounds and, faintly, the sweetness of apples from the orchard at the edge of town. The sound of laughter, a child's, drifted from somewhere behind the library. The clown listened. His hand, resting on his knee, trembled just once before settling again. He turned his gaze toward the sound, and in that look was something like memory, or maybe peace. The church bell stopped ringing. The town settled back into its quiet rhythm. The clown stayed where he was, unmoving, as the light shifted over the square and the first evening shadows began to form. By nightfall, the wind had stilled. A single leaf spiraled down, landing near his foot. The clown watched it spin on the ground until it stopped, perfectly still. Then, with slow, deliberate grace, he leaned forward, lifted the leaf, and tucked it into his coat pocket, beside something no one would ever see. The streetlights flickered on. The square glowed gold for a moment before the color faded to gray again. And though no one spoke of it aloud, every person in that town, from the waitress to the children, to the man closing the church doors, carried the quiet sense that someone was still watching over them, steady and patient as the dusk. And in the hush between one day and the next, the town learned how silence could become a kind of prayer. Winter came softly to the town, not with storms, but with a slow dimming. The days grew shorter, the air sharper, and the sound of footsteps changed as frost began to form along the edges of the brick sidewalks. Smoke rose from chimneys like quiet signals, curling toward a sky that never seemed to brighten past silver. The clown remained in the square. He no longer wore the full coat, only the vest beneath it, the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing wrists pale and thin. The paint on his face had grown faint, worn down by time and weather. Some mornings it was almost gone, leaving behind only the red mark of his mouth, faded like an old photograph. People passed him without staring now. They had grown used to his stillness, to the way his presence seemed to steady things. When the clock above the barbershop ticked off a second too soon, he'd glance up, as though listening to the rhythm of the town itself. When the postman dropped a letter and didn't notice, the clown would walk forward, pick it up, and leave it on the step. Always silent, always deliberate. The waitress often left a cup of coffee on the diner's stoop before opening. Some mornings, steam still rose when she returned for it. Other days, she found the cup untouched, but a folded leaf or a button resting beside it. Tokens that no one quite understood, but no one dared to throw away. At the edge of the square, near the church, a small pine tree had started to grow where there used to be only gravel. No one remembered planting it. It stood crooked, fragile, but green. Children had begun leaving tiny ribbons on its branches, bits of color in the grayness of the season. The clown sometimes paused beside it on his walks, tilting his head as though hearing something faint inside the needles. Maybe wind, maybe memory. One afternoon, snow began to fall for the first time that year. The flakes were light, almost shy. The town seemed to hold its breath as the rooftops took on their first dusting of white. The clown stood in the middle of the square, letting the snow land on his hair, on his shoulders, on the worn red of his mouth. He did not move. To anyone watching, it looked as if he belonged to the snowfall, a figure made of patience and weather. From the corner of Main Street, a man watched him. He was older now, a familiar shape grown thin with the years. He leaned on the doorframe of the hardware store, his breath rising in the cold. After a long while, he stepped forward and crossed the square. The snow crunched softly under his boots. When he reached the clown, he stopped, uncertain of what to say. The clown turned his head, eyes soft, waiting. The man cleared his throat, his voice rough from disuse. "You were here that day," he said. The clown didn't nod, didn't deny. Just stood there, the white around him catching the faint light of dusk. "He was my boy," the man said quietly. "He sent a letter. Said he's doing all right." The clown blinked once. His breath fogged the air. The man reached into his coat and took out a folded paper. He held it for a moment, then tucked it into the branches of the little pine tree. "He said he remembers," he murmured. Then he turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched against the cold. The clown looked at the letter for a long time. Then, slowly, he raised a hand, gloved now, the fingers trembling slightly, and brushed the snow from its edge. He didn't take it. He just made sure it wouldn't fall. By the time night came, the snow had deepened. The square glowed with the yellow of street lamps. The clown sat on the same bench where the boy had once waited. His footprints were the only ones leading there. The wind moved gently through the pine's small branches, and the ribbons shimmered like soft, muted bells. In the distance, a train horn sounded, far away, but clear. The clown looked toward the sound. For a moment, he smiled. Not a wide smile, not painted, just the kind that lives quietly at the corner of the mouth when something inside finds peace. The snow fell thicker. The square emptied. Lights dimmed one by one until the town was swallowed in the quiet brightness of winter. The clown leaned back against the bench, his face turned upward, and let the snow cover his shoulders completely. The clock above the barbershop struck once, its chime softer than it had ever been. And in that small sound, the town understood that the quiet had become something sacred. The power went out just after dusk, as if the town had blinked and forgotten to open its eyes again. Windows that had been squares of gold turned dark at once. The barbershop clock kept its stubborn tick, but the hands were invisible, and the church bell hesitated, unsure whether night had truly begun. Snow lay low along the curbs, pressed thin by footsteps that had already vanished. The clown rose from the bench and stood in the middle of the square, listening to the way the town sounded without its hum. Somewhere, a generator coughed and fell quiet. Farther off, the river made a soft, cold music under its rim of ice. The little pine by the church held its ribbons still. In the windless dark, they looked like quiet thoughts. Headlights turned in from the highway and idled at the edge of Maine. Not bright, not rushed, just there. The engine's tremor found the clown through the soles of his shoes. He did not turn toward it. He looked instead at the diner's door, where the bell hung motionless, a small shape asking nothing of anyone. A figure stepped out from the idling truck. A coat too heavy for walking, shoulders too square for welcome. The town noticed without knowing it had noticed. A curtain shifted 2 houses down. The hardware door drew its bolt with care. The dog under the bench lifted its head and went still. The clown's breath left him in a slow cloud that dissipated before it reached his painted mouth. Boots came across the street, not hurried, not hesitant. The clown stepped once, then again, until he stood between the truck and the diner door, his back to the bell. He did not lift his hands. He did not lower his eyes. He only set his weight in the snow and let the night take his outline into itself. From somewhere behind the figure, a voice tried on the square and dropped off it. A name with 2 hard edges, shaped as if it had been carried in a pocket and worried smooth by anger. It wasn't the boy's. It was the boy's absence spoken aloud. The clown said nothing. The square answered with the sound of ice shifting in the river, a quiet adjustment, the town keeping its footing. A second set of footsteps approached from the library, softer, careful. The waitress stood just outside the cone of headlight, her apron still on though the diner was closed. She did not speak to the stranger. She looked at the clown, then past him, toward the pine. In her hands lay the white cloth with its thread of red. She folded it once, then once more, the way you keep a memory from bracing against the air. The engine idled. The breath of it collected in the cold like a low cloud. The figure tilted his head toward the clown, and the distance shrank by a fraction that felt like a door closing somewhere else. The clown did not give ground. The smallest bell stitched in the hem of his coat found a wind that wasn't there and offered the softest sound. Not a warning, not a plea, just a certainty. The waitress stepped closer to the pine and tucked the cloth beneath a ribbon. Her hands were not shaking. In one window, a lamp flared to life, battery-powered, its glow enough to show a child's silhouette lifting a hand toward the glass and leaving it there, a small palm on the night. The clown's posture shifted a hair, less a movement than the acknowledgement of another heartbeat arriving. Nothing dramatic followed. It rarely does when things are truly decided. The figure at last turned, as if checking the size of the dark, and found it too large for the shape he carried. The boots walked back the way they came. The truck door opened and closed without force. Headlights turned away, their beam thinning on the snow until it had only the strength to brush the church steps and fail there. The engine dwindled down the road, a taut sound loosening. Silence restored itself not as emptiness but as a room being returned to its furniture. The clown remained where he was, snow graining his shoulders. The waitress watched him for a count of 10, then 20, then lifted her face into the dark and smiled without showing teeth. In the window, the small hand slid down the glass, leaving a brief, clear trail. Electricity returned in a single ripple, a string of bulbs shivering on one storefront to the next. The diner's bell quivered and found its voice. The pine whispered under its ribbons. The clown exhaled, and that, too, was part of the town's light coming back. He went to the bench and sat. The waitress crossed to him, set a cup between his hands, and did not wait for thanks. On the rim, steam gathered and lifted like breath finding a rhythm again. Across the square, the barbershop clock revealed its hands, and for once they were exactly where they should be. Snow began again, the smallest possible version of it, as if the sky were practicing tenderness. The clown leaned back and watched it take the square in, flake by quiet flake. And even with the lights restored, the town understood there was a deeper brightness still on its way. Morning broke late. The sky was pale and thin, a faded blue stretched over the rooftops like an old bedsheet. Snow still clung to the gutters and the bare branches, but the wind had softened, and the air felt less like cold and more like pause. The town exhaled in long, slow breaths, chimneys murmuring, doors opening carefully, the sound of someone sweeping a porch before speaking a word. The clown was still on the bench. The cup beside him had frozen over during the night, its thin shell of ice catching the first light like glass. His coat was dusted white, his posture unchanged, calm, alert, present. He had not moved, though the snow around his boots had been disturbed by others. Someone had left a folded scarf on the back of the bench, hand-knit, blue and uneven. From the diner came the scent of coffee, sharp and alive. The waitress stood in the doorway, wiping the fog from the window with the edge of her sleeve. She saw him there and didn't wave, didn't call out. She only leaned her forehead against the glass for a moment, eyes closed, as if trying to remember the exact sound of the bell when it rang the night before. A group of children crossed the square, their boots squeaking against the packed snow. They were on their way to school, bright scarves flying, laughter echoing like tiny fireworks against the stillness. One of them, a girl with red mittens, stopped when she saw the clown. The others ran ahead, but she lingered, curious. After a moment, she knelt and began to shape the snow into a small figure at his feet. She worked quietly, not looking up, her breath making small clouds in the air. The clown watched her, motionless. When she was done, she stood and stepped back. At his boots sat a crooked snowman, tiny, with no eyes, no mouth, just a hollow shape where a face might be. The girl tilted her head, considering her work, then reached into her pocket and pressed a single marble into the snow's blank face. It caught the light and glowed faintly blue. She looked up at the clown, smiling once, a question and an offering at the same time. He inclined his head, the faintest bow. The girl's smile widened, then she turned and ran to catch her friends. As her footsteps faded, the clown looked down at the snow figure. The blue marble winked in the morning sun, the same shade as the button he'd once placed in a boy's hand. For a long time, he stood over it, snow melting slowly on his gloves. The church bell struck 8. This time, it found the note on the first try. The sound rippled through the square, through the diner windows, through the air itself. Even the pigeons seemed to pause mid-flight, startled by the perfection of it. The clown looked up, his eyes following the vibration until it dissolved into the open sky. As the morning brightened, townspeople began to gather. Not together, not planned, but drawn as if by the same thought. The grocer sweeping his stoop, the barber unlocking his door, the old man who always read the paper on the corner. One by one, they turned their heads toward the square, toward the quiet figure still standing beside the snowman. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The clock above the barbershop ticked forward, perfectly in time with the church bell. Somewhere, a door closed gently, not from fear but from calm. The town had found its rhythm again, slow, deliberate, kind. The clown stepped back, leaving the tiny snow figure untouched. His coat brushed the bench as he turned. He looked once toward the diner window, where the waitress still stood. Their eyes met for the briefest instant, hers full of understanding, his full of something softer than farewell. Then he began to walk. Across the square, past the pine with its ribbons now coated in frost, down the road that led out toward the fields. His steps were light, the sound of them nearly lost in the snow. Behind him, the marble in the snowman's face caught the light again, a single glint that lingered even after he disappeared beyond the bend. By the time the sun had fully risen, the square felt changed, not empty, but open. The air itself seemed to carry a different weight, as though something unspoken had been lifted. The waitress came out from the diner, her apron fluttering in the breeze, and looked toward the road. She didn't call out. She only smiled, the kind of smile that happens when someone realizes they've been seen all along. The light found her face, soft and pale, and she raised her hand once toward the horizon. The church bell rang again, this time, just because it could. And the sound moved through the town like a promise that would not fade. The road out of town thinned to a pale ribbon, bordered by fields the color of old linen. Patches of snow clung to the furrows where the plow had bitten last autumn. Fence posts leaned like tired sentries. The clown walked there, not fast, not slow, as if measuring the day with his steps. His coat hem brushed the brittle grass, and a faint bell in the lining gave a sound so small it could have been imagined. Back in the square, morning settled into work. The barber set a chair on the sidewalk to catch the light. The grocer lined up apples with a patience that felt like prayer. Children traced their names with mittened fingers on the diner's fogged glass and left the letters to fade. The waitress stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, watching the road until it stopped being a road and became simply distance. Then she went inside and lifted the coffee pot with two hands, as though warmth could be carried like a promise. A north wind pushed a cloud across the sun, and the day went dim for a breath. The clown paused at the edge of an open field where a scarecrow slumped crookedly on its pole. Its hat had blown off and lodged against the fence, a dark circle in the snow. He set the hat back, not quite straight, but better than before. Above him, a hawk wrote a slow circle into the sky and vanished at the horizon, as if the earth had breathed it in. He turned toward the old water tower, its paint scabbed and flaking. From there he could see the whole town laid out. The steeple, the thread of the river, the square like a held breath. He watched a long time, the way you look at someone who's asleep and safe. A freight train moved beyond the far tree line, its sound arriving late, more memory than noise. The clown's shoulders loosened by a fraction. On the road below, a pickup rolled to a stop where the town limit sign listed slightly in the frost. The engine idled, then fell quiet. No door opened. No voice traveled. Just the shape of someone staying put. The clown's gaze found it and held. He did not approach. He did not retreat. He stood beside the water tower and let the air choose between them. At the diner, the waitress wiped a dry ring into the counter and felt, without looking at the clock, that a choice was moving across the fields like weather. She folded the white cloth with the red thread and placed it beside the register. Outside, the pine's ribbons clicked softly, ice loosening from their knots. A child with red mittens pressed her marble blue eye to the snowman and whispered something to it that only snow keeps. The pickup's brake lights flared once and went dark. A hand touched the inside of the windshield, left a small clear oval, then slid away. There was enough distance that it could have been anyone, any ache. The clown lifted his chin, and the tiny bell inside his coat answered with a sound like a held breath let go. Still no door. Still no voice. The truck turned, wheels crunching the frozen shoulder, and drifted back toward the highway as if the road had reminded it of other directions. Wind carried the muffled engine note away. In its place came the ordinary, a dog bark, a shovel scraping stoop, the soft cough of the barbershop heater finding its flame. The clown lowered his head, not in relief, but in recognition, the small kind, the kind that says, the world has returned to itself. He walked down from the tower and cut across the field, leaving a neat line of prints that the sun began, immediately and gently, to soften. At the fence he stopped. A thin wire had sagged, a gap a child could slip through. He tightened it with careful hands, the gloves darkening where they brushed old rust. On the post he found a chipped porcelain knob, blue as the sky when the bell rings true. He turned it in his palm and set it back exactly as it had been, only steadier. He reached the square as the church bell prepared to mark the hour. It hesitated, a breath, then struck clean. The sound traveled over brick and glass and marrow, gathering people into a moment they didn't need to name. Doors paused halfway closed. A broom hovered above a step. The waitress, carrying a plate she did not need to carry, stopped and set it down with care, as if settling a restless bird. The clown sat. Snow had melted off the bench, leaving a dark shape like a memory of weather. He placed his hands on his knees, light as paper. Across from him, the small pine bowed under the weight of ribbons turned stiff with frost. He looked at it and listened, not to the wind, not to the traffic, but to the particular quiet that a place makes when it trusts itself again. In a house 2 streets over, a letter slid through a mail slot and landed on a rug. Footsteps approached, paused, did not pick it up yet. In the diner, someone laughed once, short, surprised, and covered their mouth as if it might scatter the moment. The clown's painted mouth, almost gone, held its line. He did not smile. He did not frown. He remained. The sun returned fully, bright but thin, and laid a clear stripe across the bench, a warmth you could measure only by staying. The barbershop clock clicked forward in time with a heartbeat that no one could point to and everyone felt. A blue glint shivered at the base of the snowman where the marble had slid half free. The girl's mitten would find it later. The clown lifted his gaze to the road and kept it there. Not waiting for anyone. Simply keeping company with the distance. And though the day unfolded without event, the town could sense something nearing, quiet as a footstep on fresh snow. Evening crept in almost unnoticed. The sky dimmed from silver to pewter, then to a deep, muted blue that seemed to hum if you stood still long enough. Street lamps blinked awake one by one, hesitant, as though testing their own light. The snow on the rooftops reflected that glow, turning the town into something soft and half-remembered. The clown sat where the last sunlight had touched him, the bench now shadowed. His gloves were damp from the day's melting snow, and a faint ring of water darkened the wood beneath his hands. He looked toward the diner's window, where the lights had already been switched off. The sign still glowed open, though everyone knew it wasn't. Some truths in this town were like that. Things that stayed lit out of habit. Down the street, the church bell rope swayed once in the cold air, though no hand had touched it. The sound was only a whisper of movement, the soft weight of rope against stone. A bird flew low across the square, its wings brushing the lamplight, and landed on the pine's top branch. It shook, scattering a few pale ribbons that drifted down like slow snow. A figure crossed the street toward him, the waitress. Her coat was too thin, her hands red from cold. She didn't speak. She simply approached the bench and sat beside him. The sound of her coat brushing the wood filled the quiet. They didn't look at each other. Between them, the air held its breath, as if listening to what neither would say. After a while, she placed something on the bench between them, a small paper bag, folded twice at the top. Inside, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper and an apple, still cold from the refrigerator. She didn't push it toward him. She just left it there, her hand resting on the paper for a moment. The clown looked down at it, then back toward the square. The light caught the faint red at the edge of his mouth, a memory of color more than paint. "I used to be afraid of quiet," she said softly. Her voice barely broke the air. "Now it feels safe." The clown turned his head slightly, enough that she could see his eyes, tired, patient, reflecting the street lamp's glow. No words came. They weren't needed. She understood. The silence between them filled with something gentle, almost warm. A car passed at the far end of Main Street, tires whispering on the snow. Its headlights brushed over the square, over the pine, over the two figures on the bench, then disappeared. The light didn't disturb them. It simply moved through, like a river passing under ice. The waitress drew her coat tighter around her. "He'll come back someday," she said, her voice even quieter now. "When he does, I think he'll stop here first." The clown lowered his gaze. The bell at the hem of his coat trembled once, almost soundless. A small gesture, a kind of assent. The waitress smiled, not because she expected it to be true, but because it felt possible in that moment. Snow began again, small flakes drifting sideways in the faint wind. They caught in her hair, on his shoulders, along the rim of the paper bag. The town lights blurred through the snowfall until the whole square looked like a memory happening again. After a long while, she stood. The clown remained seated, his stillness as steady as the lampposts. She placed her hand on the back of the bench, fingers brushing the worn wood, and said nothing more. Her footsteps faded into the snow until there was only the soft rhythm of the wind and the faint ringing of the bell in his coat. He waited there long after she was gone. The apple in the bag caught the light and glowed faintly, a small sun resting between shadows. Somewhere in the dark, the church bell began to toll, slow, deliberate, each note carrying a pause large enough to hold the night itself. The clown lifted his head and listened. With each ring, his shoulders straightened slightly, and his breath came slower, steadier. The snow thickened, softening every edge in the square until it was all one color, the color of waiting, of peace without reason. When the final bell struck, the sound hung in the air longer than it should have. The clown closed his eyes, his hands resting lightly on his knees. The snow gathered at his feet, covered the bench's shadow, covered the space between the world and what watched over it. And though no one saw it, a faint warmth lingered in the air above the square. Not from fire or light, but from something quieter. And in that fragile hush, the town began to dream again.